The world had already died once. At least, that's what most people believed. Cities once filled with laughter and light now lay in ruins, haunted by echoes and plagued by rot. The dead zones, places no sane human dared to tread, were silent testimonies to humanity's fall. But deep within the most feared zone of all, where concrete crumbled and the earth bore scorch marks from early bombings, 30 survivors huddled beneath the skeleton of a ruined parking garage. They weren't just surviving, they were preparing to stand tall. It began, as many such things did, with a desperate transmission. The radio crackled late into the night. Static fought against a broken voice. If anyone can hear this, we've found a place. Safe. High ground, supplies. But we can't hold it alone. Jenna Myers, a former EMT, tightened her grip on the transmitter, eyes flicking to the shadowed cityscape. The signal had come from within the crater zone, thought uninhabited since the last zombie surge leveled everything inside. A place no rescue team ever returned from. It's a trap, growled Eric Dalton, ex-military and unofficial leader of the 30. His beard was thick, his eyes hollowed from nights with no real sleep. No one broadcasts from the crater. Not anymore. But if it's real, Jenna replied, then there are others. Survivors. Maybe more than us. Maybe enough to take the zone back. Eric glanced around the dim camp. Faces pale from hunger. Eyes that hadn't seen hope in weeks. Among them, a father clutching his feverish child. A mechanic whose tools had been reduced to makeshift weapons. Teenagers forced into adulthood too soon. He sighed. Then we send a scout, he said. We don't all go in blind. That scout was Malik Voss, once a courier before the fall. Slim, quick, and silent, Malik could weave through the ruins like a ghost. At dawn, with nothing but a knife, a flare, and a half-functional earpiece, he slipped into the city's shadow. The crater zone was worse than stories described. Burned-out husks of buildings leaned at dangerous angles. Ash coated the streets like snowfall, mixing with blood that had dried black. Here, the air felt heavier. Wrong. Every sound echoed louder than it should have. Somewhere in the distance, a single can clattered down concrete. Malik froze, breath caught. Then came the growl. Not human. Not even close. Malik darted into a fallen metro tunnel, heart pounding. He slid behind an overturned vending machine just as a shape limped past, skeletal but fast, its limbs too long, joints unnaturally bent. Its face was shredded, but its eyes glowed faintly in the dark. Not a regular zombie. Something changed. Back at the camp, hours ticked by. No word from Malik. Maybe he turned back, said Elena, the mechanic. He would have radioed. Jenna shook her head. Unless something stopped him. Eric paced the perimeter. They couldn't afford to wait too long. Supplies were nearly gone, and now whispers of a new breed of infected had reached their borders. Creatures more intelligent. More aware. If Malik was gone, they'd lose more than a scout, they'd lose their chance at change. But then, at dusk, the flare rose. A red star in a gray sky. Malik had found something. When they reached the drop point, an abandoned school buried beneath vines and boarded windows, they found Malik leaning against a wall, panting and bloody. But alive. In his hand was a recorder. He hit play. The voice came through again, this time clearer. A woman. Calm. Calculated. We've established a safe hold in the crater zone. We call it Bastion. Solar panels, freshwater recycler, and vertical gardens. Survivors are welcome, but if you bring the infected to our doors, we won't hesitate. Then coordinates. Jenna's heart raced. Bastion wasn't a myth. But neither was what Malik had seen. I followed one, Malik said quietly. It didn't move like the others. It waited. Watched. It almost, led others around me. Like it knew. Silence gripped the group. So what? Elena asked. We leave it alone? Stay here till we rot? No, Eric said. His voice was steel. We go. We move at night, use the sewers, the rooftops, anything to avoid open ground. 30 of us. That's enough. Jenna looked around the camp. The sick child, the frightened faces. If they stayed, they'd wither. But if they went, they had a shot. A chance to reclaim something, hope, a future. Then we go, she said. From the shadows of a crumbling world, 30 brave souls began their march. The end had come once. Now, it was time to rewrite what came after. The march began under a moonless sky. 30 survivors slipped from the ruined garage like whispers in the dark. Their bags were light, water, dried food, makeshift weapons. Each step into the crater zone felt like walking into the mouth of something ancient and hungry. The city beyond was silent, but silence here didn't mean safety. It meant something was watching. Eric led the formation, his rifle slung tight to his chest. Malik moved just behind him, guiding the way through side alleys and overgrown stairwells. Jenna carried a medkit, her nerves taut. The others followed in tight groups, parents shielding children, friends with arms linked for courage. They all knew the truth, this journey wasn't just about survival. It was about not dying for nothing. They passed a church half sunken into the earth. Its steeple tilted like it had tried to flee the sky. Inside, rotted pews lay scattered. Eric paused just long enough to peer through the broken doors. No movement. No sign of life. Still, he didn't trust it. Keep moving, he whispered. We're too exposed. The sewers were the next step. Malik pried open a rusted grate behind an old laundromat. The tunnel below yawned with rot and darkness. As they descended one by one, the stink hit hard, mold, waste, decay. But the sewers offered what the streets didn't, cover. Lights off, Elena warned as they dropped into the dark. Only red lenses. Don't shine them forward. The survivors crept through narrow corridors, the sound of water trickling echoing off the slime-covered walls. Every splash felt like thunder. Jenna could hear her own heartbeat. Could the infected hear it too? Somewhere in the dark, something scraped. Stop, Eric hissed. Everyone froze. Ahead, just beyond the red glow of their dim flashlights, came a wet dragging sound. Then, silence. Eric raised his hand slowly and turned his head toward Malik. The scout nodded, unslinging his knife and creeping ahead. He didn't go far, only enough to confirm the horror. It was a body. Or what had once been one. The man's chest was torn open, ribs bent outward like broken branches. His eyes were gone, but his mouth was still open, as if frozen in a final scream. Malik stepped back quickly. It's recent, he whispered. No flies. No rot. Hours old, maybe. They kept moving. They exited the sewer near an old train yard, a place Malik had marked as the halfway point. The buildings around the lot had collapsed into themselves, leaving jagged edges and shattered steel. Between rusted-out boxcars, they found brief shelter. It was there they heard the child crying. Faint. Echoing. Too far to be one of theirs. Jenna stood first, instincts kicking in. That's a kid. Eric's jaw tightened. No. It's bait. They'd heard stories. Infected mimicking sounds. Children long dead whose voices were used like fishing lines. A desperate trick to lure in prey. But then came another voice, clearer, closer. Help, please. This wasn't a recording. It wasn't broken or looped. It was a boy. Real. And terrified. Malik looked to Eric. If we leave him, we're no better than the monsters. Eric swore under his breath. 2 minutes. In and out. No noise. Jenna, Malik, you're with me. Everyone else stays put. The three followed the voice through a shattered doorway into a half-collapsed maintenance shack. Inside, dust floated like ash. And there, beneath a broken desk, was a boy, no older than 10, clutching a stuffed dog and shaking. Jenna knelt. Hey. It's okay. We're here to help. But as soon as her fingers touched his arm, the boy's eyes widened. They followed me, he whispered. From the rafters, something dropped. A shriek pierced the air, high, inhuman, metallic. It wasn't one of the old infected. This one moved like liquid shadow, crawling on the ceiling with limbs too thin to be stable. Its face was stretched, eyes glowing faintly blue. It didn't charge. It stalked. Eric raised his rifle. Get the boy. Now. Jenna scooped him up as Malik drove his knife upward, barely missing the creature as it skittered along a support beam. Eric fired once, clean hit to the head, but it kept coming, its skull cracking open like bark instead of bone. They ran. Back through the yard, through the screech of metal, the boy crying against Jenna's chest. Behind them, the creature gave chase, faster than anything they'd seen. Then came the flare. From the rooftop, Elena launched it with practiced aim. The red burst filled the night, and from behind nearby rubble, the other survivors opened fire with cobbled weapons. The creature shrieked and turned back, finally retreating into the dark. Breathing hard, Jenna dropped beside the others, boy still trembling in her arms. What was that? She asked. Eric didn't answer. He looked toward the north, where Bastion was said to wait. And he knew. They hadn't just entered the dead zone. They had entered something worse. Something that remembered. The night didn't end. It just shifted into something darker. They set up camp inside an overturned freight container, its sides reinforced with sheet metal and salvaged panels. The boy, Aiden, curled up beside Jenna, still clutching the dirty stuffed animal that hadn't left his arms since they found him. His face was pale, but alive. That alone was a victory. The rest of the group remained silent. No one dared speak of the thing that chased them. No one wanted to ask why it hadn't acted like the undead they knew. Or how it had stalked them with purpose. Eric crouched outside, keeping watch. His eyes never blinked. His hands never left the grip of his weapon. Malik sat beside him, sharpening his knife on a rusted piece of scrap. That thing, he said finally. It wasn't just fast. It was watching us. Not hungry, strategic. Eric nodded once. They're evolving. Malik paused. Or someone's changing them. That idea hung in the air like poison. Inside, Elena was tinkering with the radio they'd salvaged weeks ago, trying to boost the signal. Bastion's transmission had grown faint again, as if the closer they got, the more the city fought back. Come on, she whispered, twisting wires with calloused fingers. Give me something. Crackling. Static. Then a voice. Open signal. Repeat, open signal. Bastion is under threat. Requesting survivors with experience in defense or medical. Coordinates remain unchanged. Arrival deadline, 72 hours. After that, gates will be sealed. Jenna straightened. They're still there. And they're in trouble, Elena added. Something's pushing in on them. Eric stepped inside. Then we move faster. We don't wait. If Bastion falls before we get there, we're walking into a graveyard. But what about Aiden? Jenna asked. Eric looked down at the boy. His small hands still clung to her coat even in sleep. "We carry him." By dawn, they were on the move again, slipping through the skeleton of the city like veins through a corpse. The streets grew narrower. Stranger. Buildings looked less like they'd collapsed from decay and more like they'd been reshaped, rearranged into jagged walls and strange barriers. Almost as if something was trying to corral movement. Herd the living into chosen paths. "It's like a maze," Malik muttered. "Not natural." Signs of life became rarer. No birds. No rats. Just empty silence broken only by distant screeches that echoed without a source. They passed an old fire station, its doors clawed through. Inside, dried blood formed symbols across the walls, patterns Jenna couldn't recognize but made her skin crawl. That night, they found temporary shelter in a burned-out grocery store. Shelves overturned. Skeletons beneath shopping carts. Eric set the watch rotations. Malik stayed on first. Jenna sat with Aiden, coaxing him to eat something from a salvaged ration pack. He finally spoke. "They weren't always like that." She blinked. "The infected?" He nodded. "They used to be slow. Dumb. They groaned and bit and that was all. But then someone came." Jenna's heart slowed. "Who?" Aiden looked up at her, his eyes clearer than any child his age should have had. "A man in white. He had machines. And he talked to them like they were pets." Jenna looked across the room toward Eric. "He was changing them," the boy said softly. "He said the world needed new rules. Smarter monsters." Eric didn't move for a long time. When he finally did, it was only to say, "We reach Bastion in 2 days. No more stops. No more side paths. If someone's behind this, then Bastion may be the last place that still fights back." But even as they prepared to sleep, something moved outside. Malik raised a hand, eyes scanning the dark behind the broken glass windows. Then came the sound. Not a growl. Not a snarl. It was knocking. 3 steady knocks against the glass. Knock. 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 No voice. No creature in sight. Just the sound. Then silence. Jenna's hand reached for her weapon. Eric stepped forward, slowly. And from the shadows beyond the broken doors, a single figure stepped into view. It wasn't one of the infected. It was a man. In white. His lab coat fluttered in the breeze. And as his face entered the glow of their flickering camp light, they saw something worse than blood, worse than decay, calm. He smiled. "I've been looking for you." Before anyone could move, a sudden high-pitched whine filled the store, like a signal, like a call. From every direction outside, shadows began to shift. They weren't alone. Not anymore. The man in the white lab coat stood perfectly still, framed by the ruined doorway. Blood smeared his sleeves. His smile was wrong, not mad, not crazed, but calculated. Calm. As if he had expected to find them all along. Eric raised his rifle, the barrel steady. "Don't move." But the man didn't flinch. He simply tilted his head and glanced around the grocery store as if inspecting a half-finished project. "You brought more than I anticipated," he said softly. "Good. The results will be much clearer this way." Jenna moved Aiden behind her, shielding him. Malik edged left, knife ready. The others froze, weapons drawn but uncertain. The real threat was outside, the shifting shadows creeping around the building. "What are you?" Eric asked. "Some kind of experiment gone wrong story come to life?" The man chuckled. "I was a researcher. A survivor, like you. But while others fled, I studied the infection. Learned it. Guided its evolution. You see chaos. I see design. Behind him, a pair of glowing eyes emerged. Then another. Then dozens. They're not feral anymore, he continued. They listen now. They wait. And when I give the word. Eric fired. The shot struck the man's shoulder, spinning him back through the door. Screams rang out. Eric turned to the group. Go. Out the back. Move now. They ran, the 30 of them, crashing through the shattered remains of the store's rear wall. Aiden was in Jenna's arms again. Malik led the way through the alley, vaulting over debris. Behind them, shrieks erupted, the new infected flooding the store, climbing the walls like insects, smashing through broken glass and rusted shelving. Elena tossed a Molotov into the path behind them. The explosion lit up the alley like a brief sunrise, flames roaring and forcing the creatures to scatter. He's controlling them, she shouted as they ran. Like a hive. Eric's voice was steel. Then we run faster than his hive can catch. They tore through empty streets and courtyards filled with bones. Bastion was still 2 days away. They had to make it in one. Malik guided them into a collapsed office building. He led them to a service elevator shaft, the cables still hanging down. Up, he said. Roof access leads to the highway. Bastion's that way. One by one, they climbed. Children were hoisted by the strongest. The injured pushed themselves through pain. Every screech from the street below echoed up the shaft like a warning. On the roof, dawn began to touch the horizon with faint orange. But the sky wasn't the only thing glowing. In the far distance, a cluster of lights blinked steadily. Bastion, Jenna whispered. It's real. They had hope. But hope had a cost. Malik, last to climb, reached the top just as the infected reached the bottom of the shaft. One of them, the kind that moved like spiders, began scaling the cables with terrifying speed. Malik turned and kicked the loose gear into the shaft, sending a metal beam straight down. It collided with the creature mid-climb. A shriek erupted, followed by silence. They crossed the rooftops without speaking. Every second mattered. By mid-morning, they reached the overpass. Beyond it was a fenced road, metal-spiked barricades, signs warning no entry, authorized survivors only. A large gate stood in the distance. On a nearby watchtower, a signal light blinked red. Bastion. It was real. And it was close. But the gate wasn't opening. We need to signal them, Jenna said. Elena fired a flare. The red burst arced into the air above the ruins, visible for miles. Nothing. Then, movement on the wall. Figures, armed, human, appeared. One raised a hand and pointed behind the group. Jenna turned. The horde was coming. Not just running. Organized. Flanking them from both sides, driving them straight toward Bastion's gate like sheep to a fence. And there, in the middle of the road, walking with slow, deliberate steps, was the man in white. His shoulder bled freely, but he walked like he couldn't feel it. You brought this on yourselves, he shouted. I offered order. But you insist on chaos. Eric raised his rifle. This ends here. No, the man replied, grinning. This begins here. From behind him, the horde stopped. Perfectly still. Every infected creature, tall, twisted, feral, stood like statues. Then they knelt. Bastion's gate opened slightly. A voice boomed from a loudspeaker. Run. Now. Bring the boy. Aiden looked up. They're scared of me, he whispered. He was looking for me. Eric grabbed his arm. Then you're going to be the reason we survive. The 30 survivors ran, toward the gate, toward hope, toward a fight none of them truly understood. But one thing was clear. They would not run again. The gates of Bastion yawned open just wide enough for them to slip through. "Go, go," shouted a voice from the loudspeaker. Eric was the first to reach the threshold. Behind him, Malik and Elena herded the others, flanking the group like guard dogs, weapons drawn, breath burning in their lungs. Jenna clutched Aiden to her chest as the boy whispered things she didn't yet understand, fragments of memories, words like the hive, the man with wires, and I didn't mean to help him. Once the last foot crossed the steel line, the gate slammed shut with a crash of hydraulics. A blast door dropped behind it with the finality of a coffin lid. Thick silence followed. The chaos outside, the thunder of feet, the inhuman growls, it all vanished behind the reinforced walls. Then came the click of safety locks. And after that, the humans appeared. Soldiers. Not ragged survivors, but organized, armored men and women with military gear and solemn eyes. They moved like people who'd fought for everything and expected it all to be taken again tomorrow. "You brought him," one of them said, stepping forward. His name tag read Captain Holt. He didn't smile. "I'm Eric Dalton." "This is our group," Eric said, chest still rising with adrenaline. "We heard your broadcast. We know. We've been watching you since the flare 2 nights ago." "You what?" Elena asked, stepping forward. "We saw the creature you faced," Holt replied. "And the man. We didn't act sooner because we weren't sure if you'd already been compromised." Jenna narrowed her eyes. "He's trying to use the infected like soldiers." "No," Holt said grimly. "He already is." He turned and motioned for them to follow. The group moved together, 30 strong, through a tunnel that smelled faintly of ozone and oil. When they emerged into Bastion proper, the sight nearly stole their breath. It wasn't a bunker. It was a city reborn. Solar panels covered the rooftops. Greenhouses bloomed atop abandoned buildings. Children played within fences while armed sentries patrolled above. And high above everything, broadcast towers, relays, antennas pulsing with quiet energy. "This is impossible," Malik muttered. "This," Holt said, "is what we built from the wreckage. But it's barely holding. And now that he knows you're here, he'll come." They were taken to a central hall, half hospital, half command center. Medics treated the injured. Jenna helped as they moved the sick from stretchers. Others handed out food and clean water. It was the first real meal any of them had eaten in weeks. But the quiet didn't last. A technician burst in an hour later. "We have activity. Southwest perimeter. They're massing." Everyone turned to Holt. He didn't flinch. "Sound the alert. Lock all gates. Bring the boy." Aiden, sitting beside Jenna, stiffened. "No," she said. "He's just a child." Holt's voice was steady. "He's not just anything. He knows things. And we don't have time to wait." Eric stepped in. "If you want our help, you don't start by treating a 10-year-old like an enemy." "You don't understand," Holt snapped. "The man in white, we call him Dr. Morrow. He was part of Project Dawnlight. A government bioweapons unit. Aiden is the only surviving test subject." Silence. Jenna turned to Aiden. His eyes were filled with guilt. "I didn't know what he was doing. He said he was helping people. I wanted to go home." "And you will," she whispered. "But not like this." Holt looked between them, then gave a sharp nod. "Fine. But if the creatures breach the wall, we use everything. No matter what it takes." Outside, the sky darkened again. Too early for night. From Bastion's towers, spotlights lit the ruins beyond. And in that light, they saw them, hundreds of infected, lined up like soldiers on a forgotten battlefield. Standing. Waiting. Then they parted. And Dr. Morrow stepped forward. his white coat now blackened with blood. His arm wrapped in metal. His eyes calm and fixed on Bastion's walls. He raised one hand. Every creature behind him dropped to their knees. Jenna's breath caught. He's commanding them. It's worse, Holt murmured. He's teaching them. Then came the sound, a low, humming tone. From somewhere in the distance, a pulse swept through the air. The infected stood. And ran. Toward Bastion. Toward the last standing survivors. The wall trembled before the first creature even touched it. From the watchtower, Malik watched the infected surge forward like a living wave. But these weren't the stumbling corpses he'd outrun in city ruins. These were coordinated, tight-packed units. They didn't scatter or lurch, they advanced with a purpose. And at the center of it all stood Dr. Morrow, untouched by chaos, one hand still raised. Below, Captain Holt issued orders through a wired headset. All posts, prepare for breach protocol. Sharpshooters target group leaders. Defense towers 1 through 4, fire when ready. Klaxons echoed through Bastion. Red lights pulsed. The gate behind them locked in 3 separate segments. Eric stood near the outer platform with his rifle tight in hand. He scanned the horizon, counting the seconds before impact. Jenna stood nearby, shielding Aiden with her body. You said he was a test subject, she shouted over the noise. What exactly did they test on him? Holt's jaw tightened. Cognitive biolinking. Morrow was trying to map empathy triggers in children, to control the infected through emotional echo. Aiden was the only one who could reach them. That's why Morrow still wants him. Aiden spoke, voice trembling. He used me to calm them. Then he made them kill people who scared me. I didn't know he was doing it on purpose. He's not doing it to them anymore, Elena muttered, watching the horde close in. He's doing it with them. The first impact came like a thunderclap. A monstrous screecher slammed into the wall, climbing up metal panels with elongated claws. A second later, others followed. Fire from Bastion's defense towers lit up the field. Heavy rounds punched holes through the front lines, but it barely slowed them down. More surged forward. Malik dropped one with a clean headshot, then another. But the creatures learned. They shifted, moved erratically, using wreckage as cover. This wasn't mindless violence. This was strategy. They're adapting, Eric said. They're flanking south. Fall back to inner defense point B. Holt barked. Lock the outer barricade. Gates slammed shut behind the defenders as they retreated toward the second line of steel-reinforced barriers. Fires burned outside, staining the air with black smoke. Inside the walls, Bastion civilians moved toward shelters. Doors sealed behind them. Only the fighters remained, maybe 60 strong, including the 30 survivors who had brought this fight to Bastion's doorstep. Jenna kept Aiden close. He was shaking now, muttering under his breath. I can feel them, he whispered. They're angry. But scared too. Eric knelt in front of him. Can you stop them? Aiden shook his head. He's inside them now. He used my mind to find the key. I didn't mean to help him. I just wanted to be safe. Eric's voice softened. You didn't do this, kid. He did. But we can end it. Outside, the creatures breached the second gate. An explosion rocked the compound as one of Bastion's towers crumbled under the weight of a mutated brute, 8 feet tall, with bone armor fused to its skin. It plowed through defenders like twigs. 2 men screamed before it crushed them. Eric fired into its eye. The brute dropped. But more were coming. They retreated again, back into Bastion's inner courtyard, the final fallback zone. The survivors formed a wall, guns and blades ready, breath ragged. Behind them, the blast doors to the core of Bastion began to close. This is it, Holt said grimly. If they get past us, there's no one left. Jenna looked at Aiden. There has to be a way to break his control. What if you disconnect? I don't know how. Then do what you did before. Feel for them. But not with fear, with something stronger. Aiden's eyes fluttered shut. Outside, the horde paused. The shrieks fell quiet. Then the front line turned their heads toward the walls, and began tearing at each other. Eric stepped forward. What's happening? He's pushing them too hard, Aiden said, shaking. He's trying to force control, but I'm pulling them back. The connection was a tug of war, invisible but immense. Morrow stepped forward now, his smile gone, veins in his neck bulging as if the strain was physical. You think you can resist me, boy? I made you. Aiden screamed. I'm not yours. And something broke. The horde paused. Then scattered. Disoriented. Unbound. Some collapsed. Others fled. The brute at the gate roared once more, then turned and sprinted back into the fog. Inside Bastion, silence fell again. Not victory. But survival. For now. Eric turned to Aiden, who was collapsing into Jenna's arms, pale but breathing. Holt exhaled. You just saved the last stronghold left. Jenna looked down at the boy. And knew the war was just beginning. The battlefield outside Bastion lay eerily still. Fires burned low. Smoke clung to the morning air like a memory no one wanted to keep. Infected bodies, twisted, reeking, inhuman, littered the ground. But the silence wasn't peace. It was a pause. A breath before the next storm. Inside Bastion, the survivors gathered. They were bruised, bloodied, and shaken, but still alive. Aiden sat wrapped in a thick blanket, his head leaning against Jenna's shoulder. His eyes were distant, but alert. Whatever tether Morrow had on the horde, it was broken. For now. Captain Holt stood at the center of the war room, pointing at the holographic map flickering on the wall. Eric, Malik, Elena, Jenna, and a handful of Bastion's leaders circled around him. Morrow retreated, Holt began, but he didn't fall back far. Our scouts tracked him to an abandoned biotech facility just outside the southern crater. We believe that's his new base of operations, and where he's continuing his experiments. Eric crossed his arms. Why not bomb it? We've tried. Twice. Something interferes with our targeting systems. Satellite link gets jammed the moment we focus in. Bastion doesn't have the airpower to send a full strike. We'd lose everything. So, Malik said, you need boots on the ground. Exactly. A small, fast unit. Get in, shut him down. Destroy his equipment. End this war before it spreads beyond the zone. Jenna looked down at Aiden. He'll know we're coming. Yes, Holt replied. That's why we're sending someone he doesn't expect. Eric's eyes narrowed. Us. You made it this far, Holt said. You know the terrain. And most of all, you're not part of our command structure. He's not watching you the way he's watching us. Elena scoffed. We're survivors, not assassins. And Bastion's defenses won't survive another siege, Holt said. You saw what happened. If he regains control of the horde, if he figures out how to block Aiden again, we're done. Aiden stirred. I can go with you. No, Jenna said immediately, but he continued. I can help. I know how he thinks. I've seen the layout of the lab. I can get you inside. No, Jenna's voice was firm. You've done enough. Let us handle this. A moment passed. Then Eric nodded. We'll go. Malik sighed. Figures. Survive the dead zone just to sign up for a suicide mission. Elena smiled faintly. We always knew this story wouldn't end quiet. They left that night. 5 of them, Eric, Malik, Elena, Jenna, and a tech specialist from Bastion named Kira, who carried explosives and a worn-out map with handwritten annotations. Their route took them through the Hollow District, once a place of schools and playgrounds, now overgrown and hollowed out by rot. They moved fast, silent, weaving through broken windows and abandoned basements. But every step brought more signs of Morrow's presence. Symbols marked on walls in red paint, twisted shapes, half human, half mathematical. Elena snapped photos as they passed. Looks like ritual, she whispered. It's control, Kira said. He's trying to create a language. One the infected can read. By dawn, they reached the edge of the biotech complex. A massive structure of crumbling glass and concrete. Vines covered its face, but lights pulsed beneath the canopy of decay. Cameras rotated along the roof. Drones buzzed overhead. Security's live, Kira whispered. We'll have to bypass the east wing, less surveillance there. They crept toward the building, weaving through rusted delivery trucks and fallen scaffolding. When they reached a service tunnel, Kira plugged a small device into the control panel. Give me 30 seconds. Eric raised his rifle, eyes on the shadows. Then the door opened with a hiss. Inside, the air was cold and humming with low-frequency vibrations. The walls were lined with glass tubes, most shattered, a few still filled with pale fluid and something half-living, twitching inside. Jenna looked around, stomach turning. What did he do here? Whatever he wanted, Malik said grimly. They moved deeper, through research corridors and server halls, until they reached a main chamber. And there he was. Dr. Morrow stood before a massive terminal, wires running from his back into the machinery. His eyes flicked up as they entered. Ah, he said, smiling faintly. I was wondering when you'd arrive. Eric raised his weapon. This ends now. I don't think so, Morrow replied. You've already lost. He pressed a button. All around them, glass pods opened. And the creatures inside were not infected. They were evolving. Smarter. Stronger. Programmed to kill. And they were already waking up. The chamber filled with the hiss of pressurized seals breaking. One by one, the containment pods opened, spilling vapor and fluid onto the cold steel floor. From the mist stepped Morrow's perfected nightmares, taller than the infected they'd fought before, sleeker, armored in hardened bone. Their eyes glowed faint blue, but their movements were precise, controlled. They didn't groan. They waited. Morrow stood before them like a conductor before an orchestra. I call them Echo-born, he said. Built from your pain. Shaped by fear. They don't rot. They don't turn. They learn. Elena raised her pistol. Let's see how well they die. Morrow raised a hand, his fingers twitching unnaturally, like he was pulling invisible strings. The Echo-born charged. Eric fired first, taking down one with a headshot, but it rose again seconds later, a regenerative hiss coming from the wound. Eyes and spines. Kira shouted, tossing a shock grenade. The explosion lit the chamber in blue, stunning 3 of them long enough for Malik to leap forward and bury his blade into the neck of the closest creature. It screamed, not a growl, but a scream, full of rage. Behind them, Kira worked furiously at the terminal. I'm uploading the virus to corrupt the command link, 20% complete. Jenna and Elena fought side by side, backing toward Kira. Blood sprayed. Claws tore across armor. Malik took a hit to the ribs and staggered, but kept fighting. Then Morrow stepped down from the platform, calm as ever. You still think this is about survival, he said. But I've already surpassed you. The old world failed. What I offer is balance. Eric turned to face him. You offer slavery. Moro's smile faded. You should have stayed hidden, he said, and sent the remaining Echoborn toward Kira. Jenna threw herself in front of the tech, blocking one creature with her full weight. It slammed her into the ground, claws digging into her side. She screamed, but didn't let go of her blade. With her free hand, she shoved her knife into the base of its skull. The creature collapsed. Upload at 60%. Kira shouted. I need more time. Malik, bleeding badly, leaned against a pillar, rifle shaking. Time's one thing we don't have. Suddenly, the terminal blared, a proximity alarm. Someone's coming, Kira whispered. From the north tunnel. A heavy door behind them burst open. And in ran Aiden, covered in dirt, eyes blazing with purpose. I told you I could help, he said, breathless. I followed your signal. Jenna's voice cracked. Aiden, no. But it was too late. Moro froze, his eyes narrowing. You brought him here, he said in disbelief. You handed me my key. No, Aiden replied. I came to shut the door you left open. He walked toward Moro, eyes glowing faintly now too, like the creature's, but his light was golden, not blue. The Echoborn halted. Confused. Twitching. Eric stared. What's happening? Moro linked me to the infection, Aiden said. But he forgot something. I can talk to them too. He lifted his hand, mirroring Moro's gesture. The Echoborn twitched, then turned. On Moro. No. Moro screamed, backing away. They are mine. But the Echoborn no longer listened. They surrounded him. One reached out and tore the cables from his back. And then they stopped moving. Like statues. Still. Lifeless. Kira's voice echoed over the silence. Upload complete. Every light in the lab flickered. The servers sparked. The hum of control frequencies fell quiet. And Moro, bleeding on the floor, looked up with hollow eyes. I only wanted to fix what the world broke. Eric stepped forward, rifle steady. It wasn't yours to fix. He pulled the trigger. And it was done. 2 days later, the 30 survivors stood atop Bastion's southern wall. The sky was clear for the first time in weeks. Fires no longer burned on the horizon. The Echoborn remained dormant, their connection severed, their creation redeemed by the very child Moro tried to use. Aiden leaned against the railing beside Jenna. Do you think they'll come back? He asked. Jenna shook her head. Not while we stand. Eric approached. We still have work to do. Bastion held, but others might still be out there. We rebuild. We protect. We teach people how to fight smart. Malik grinned, bruised and bandaged. And maybe get a week of sleep, for once. Elena raised her flask. To the 30. To Bastion. To the last stand. They all raised their weapons, their hands, their hearts. Because though the world had ended once, 30 brave souls had shown that the fight was far from over. And in the shadows of the dead zone, hope had finally begun to rise. White heavy checkmark the end.